Be me, 16 years old, scrawny, going into sophomore year. Don't have a great life, but manageable in hindsight. I was really depressed at the time and thought about suicide a lot. I ride a bike home because I don't have a car yet. I start learning the train schedule to make sure I don't get stuck waiting to cross the tracks by a train. Get a brilliant idea one day. Speed home a long road on a little BMX bike to catch the train before it gets to the tracks. Bike is one of those one-speeders with a light frame, and you stand to pedal if you don't want to look like a clown. Put on headphones so it looks like it might be an accident when I get hit. People will just assume I didn't hear it. While crossing the fucking street to get to the train, this Lexus comes speeding by at way over the 35-mile speed limit. No helmet, of course. Oh, fuck that JPEG. Little BMX bike BTFO by speeding car. Get flung onto hood of car. Unconscious before I hit the ground. Hear myself pronounced as DOA. Mom shows up to ID body, absolutely devastated. Hear cops talking about how I must have gotten my bike stuck in the railroad tracks and not heard the train. Death by multiple system failure and severe spinal cord trauma. Start to fade towards some other form of consciousness. Open eyes to see cops and bystanders. Try to move. Fires of hell would have been less painful. Bleeding from my head, face, nose, chest, and leg. Bit through tongue a bit. Collarbone and ribs are obviously broken, along with several fingers and my nose. But I'm alive. I'm not sure if it was me going into shock or seeing what would have happened made me turn into a goof, but I was just so happy to be alive. Still feels good knowing that I got the sense knocked back into me. It was quite the wake-up call. My face when being hit by a car was better than not being hit by a car. Be my mom in Indiana about 28 years ago. Light's coming in from outside the window. Blinds are down, but the light is so bright that it's coming in anyway and making it difficult to see. Hear children walking in hallway. See 5-year-old son walking. See ceiling lamp above. Somehow know it's going to hit him if he walks under it. Grab him. Ceiling lamp crashes to the ground. But son's okay, so no fucks given. Light outside disappears. Don't know what happens, goes back to sleep. Next night, wakes up, see light in son's room. Walk in to tell him to go to sleep. Son has his younger sister laying down on a piece of cardboard, using a lamp as if she's on an operating table. Not sure what's happening, tell him to stop and go back to bed. Nobody likes to talk about it, even 28 years later. This story is 100% true. It's not paranormal or anything, just creepy as fuck. Be me. Be shithead teenager. Me and friends always used to break into an old abandoned houses and hang out in them. One house is right next to my friend Cameron's house. Big red 2-story house with a basement. Cool as fuck. No one can get into it. Take a look around. See that there's a back door that goes into the basement. Nothing keeping it locked but some rusty old padlock and this thing attached to the doorframe. Unscrew that piece and I'm in. Invite all my friends to hang out in there. We go in. Garbage on the floors, basement is covered in cobwebs. Go upstairs. The door to the upstairs is barred shut. Literally, with metal bars. What the fuck? We decide that we want in there. Takes us about a month of prying with a crowbar and chipping away the door that we finally get in. Door swings open as we pry the last bar off the hinge. House is actually really nice, but kind of spooky. All the curtains are nailed onto the walls so that they can't open. House is nearly pitch black. No furniture. It's completely abandoned. After looking around for a bit, we find a room upstairs. This one is locked from the outside. Unlock it. Go inside. There's a bed and a nightstand, and nothing else. Window to the backyard is broken out. Cameron calls me over. Dude, check this shit out. Move over. There's a hand on the bed. Skeletal, like it's been there for a while. And it is sitting right next to a pair of handcuffs that are attached to the bed frame. We all hurry out. Next day, a friend calls me. Says he woke up in the middle of the night to a bunch of sirens. The house caught fire and almost burned down. The entire inside had to be gutted. I don't know why, but this creeps the fuck out of me. Had a dream when I was about 15, where I was in an all-girls orphanage, where the adults were very abusive to us, and when you stepped out of line, you disappeared without a word. Well, one girl got in trouble and was taken away, so me and a few others followed them quietly to the attic, where we saw a white bathtub in the middle of the room. We were eventually caught and were all lined up with our hands tied, waiting for our turn. The first girl to go was strung up naked, spread eagle, face down above the bathtub. One of the adults took a large dagger and slit open her stomach, and we all watched her scream and bleed into the bathtub. One by one, each girl went up and was slit open. When I got close to the front, I freaked out and started to run. I was then chased after for miles with no end in sight. It's been years, and I still remember the imagery of it all. The weirdest thing is the name of this bath thing was never mentioned in the dream, but I know it's called the Sun Ritual. Haven't thought about this in 10 years, but here goes. Move into house with my sister, mom, and new stepdad and his kids. House is old as shit, but it's been worked on and extended plenty over the years. Sometime in the first month, a few of us start hearing noises in the roof at night. Stepdad spends ages looking for a trapdoor or holes in the roof to fill and put traps in there. Gives up and calls the old landlord. Says it's in the laundry, but probably been painted over. Bingo, find it. Stepdad has me holding some rat poison and traps while he looks around with a torch. Suddenly, he stops talking mid-sentence and just stands there on the ladder for a while. He steps down and tells me to have a look, that he's got pretty poor eyesight. It's a fucking pillow and blanket that look like they're from the 50s. We throw them in the trash. They look and smell absolutely disgusting. Tell my mom, but not anybody else. Other kids don't need to hear about that. 1 week later, my sister wakes up, my mom in tears. Says she saw someone walk into her room as she was walking back after going to get water or something. Stepdad tells me about it the next day after Ben woke up and checking it out. His kids were both asleep, as was I. She has a history when it comes to seeing weird shit when she was younger, so no one thinks anything more of it. In my room a few weeks later, in bed, trying to suck my own cock or whatever teenage me was doing up late. Room is isolated from the rest of the house in an old study. Windy as fuck, finally get to sleep. Wake up hearing constant scratches on my windows, and what sounds like a possum in the roof above me. Not really fazed, though, it's just the wind blowing a branch at my window, like I was used to from my old house. Next morning, after barely sleeping, and concerned about my windows, I go have a look outside. Outside is a jungle. Only had a brief look before, but nothing but a shed that no one uses. Realize there's no bushes or trees remotely near any window near my room. Visible scratch marks, just random and quite high up. Not much of a story, but it was the spookiest year of my life, living in that shitty house. Be me, aged 9 to 10. Parents divorced since I was 3. Staying with my dad at weekend. His house was at least 5 miles from any real town/city. Land was quite large, but he didn't own much of it, played on it nevertheless. Large forced the area behind house, which the window in my room was facing. Looking through photo album my dad had. Mostly family photos, birthdays, Christmases, etc. Towards the end, the pictures are of the house, taken from the back of the house. Each one closer than the one before. Several are of me playing in the forest. One clearly taken from behind a tree, no more than 50 meters away from where I was. Wasn't too fussed since I assumed it was my dad. Asked him why he took them because they were different to the rest of the pictures. He seemed bewildered and began flicking through. I realized I hadn't looked through all of them, but he was nearing towards the final pages, the ones I hadn't seen. Noticed color drain from his face on the penultimate page, clearly nervous about turning the page. Finally does, and I notice him shiver, close his album, and packs a bag for me and him. We leave the house and only returned a few times before putting it up for sale. Reported it to the police, but there was little they could do. Skip like 5 years. Ask him what was on the final pages. He is clearly distressed, and he sits me down. Tells me that they were of me, asleep, taken directly by my bedside. But the last picture was a picture of my window, taken from inside my room. Apparently, several people were stood outside my room with masks on, looking directly at the camera. I still don't understand why I didn't wake up whilst this person was in my room, since I am usually a light sleeper. But I wasn't able to sleep well for the next few months, without making sure the window was locked and the curtains were drawn. Be me, 12 or 13 years old. Parents owned 2 houses, 200 miles from each other. My house was always creepy and haunted. Had a hallway downstairs. Always kept my eyes closed when I walked down the hallway because I would always see a person standing at the end if I didn't. Staying at one house with only my mom. Have to piss one night. Turn on the light to walk down creepy hallway to relieve bladder. Eyes closed. Why am I closing my eyes? I'm not a kid anymore. Opens eyes. Above the bathroom door, there's a humanoid thing with leathery skin clinging to the ceiling by its hands and feet. Its spine is sticking out, generally just visually unappealing. Fuck. Run upstairs to piss in the other bathroom. Call my sister, who is staying at the other house with Dad. Tell her the whole thing. She tells me she saw the same thing at the other house before I called. Okay, I got one from recently. Me. Used to be scrawny little friend. Bad diet, bad sleep, bad attitude, etc. Have sleep paralysis all the time. Always would be fucking giga scary demons and ghosties, etc. Always scared shitless, just hoping it stops. Get actual sensation from them touching me. Ice fucking cold. Wanna cry, scream, and run away, but I can't fucking move. Fast forward years later. Get fit as fuck. Eat healthy, good attitude, strong as fuck. Big boy coming through. Haven't had sleep paralysis in years. Finally have it for the first time a few nights ago. I'm awake, and I find that I can't move. Fucking annoying. Fuck. Annoyed as fuck. Looking around. Then, I see it. In the dark half of my room, an even darker thing. Size of a small boy, black as space. Still can't fucking move. It starts slowly walking over to me. I'm angry. Not like caught my wife cheating angry. Like star-shattering ass fuck angry. Start shaking out of anger that this friend had the gall to challenge me at my most vulnerable. Start literally fucking growling because I can't roar at this little ghost friend. At the peak of my anger, feel like I'm going to explode. Almost like it senses what will happen. It starts slowly moving backwards. Disappears into the wall. Soon as it's gone, paralysis goes away. I leap out of bed naked. So fucking goddamn aneurysm mad. Rush over to the wall. Smack fuck out of it. Start roar laughing. Little fucking bitch ass ghost. My natural instinct used to be one rooted, based in fear. Now, it is one forged of fire and anger.
Operation Wendigo. Operation Wendigo was enacted in 2013 by the FBI due to the National Park Ranger Service reporting the highest cases of missing and/or attacked campers by creatures in the woods. Normally, the FBI gets reports of incidents in the national parks when something of significance happened, like the National Park Skinwalker incident, which was recently declassified. The names of the cases do not necessarily reflect actual events in the case, but rather what has been reported to us by the park rangers, most of which are dramatically created, mainly to show the level of severity of the case. Anyways, sorry for the preface. My name is Agent Johnson, and I was assigned to Operation Wendigo with my partner, Agent Borsky, back in November. Agent Borsky is rather new to the Bureau and hasn't been hardened by the cruel nature of the job. Borsky is a religious man, I believe, which is perfectly fine, yet I have found that to become an issue in the past with other cases. We are not the first agents on this case. They didn't tell us how many sets of agents they had before, but we are able to look at the case file to see all the previous notes and logs. Most of the time looking at case notes, there is a slight disconnect between each different sets of agents, as you would suspect, since not everyone looks at things the same way. Agent Borsky and I are driving to the national park early one November morning, and he's reviewing the case notes aloud while I'm driving. It appears that in July of 2013, there have been 12 missing persons and 37 reports of animal attacks in just this park alone. That's essentially an attack a day. That level of attacks is extremely strange, but it gets weirder. Some of the reports of the creature, not animal, was that it was bipedal and it had claws. All of the attacks were at night, so the victims were not able to get a better description than that. It didn't give us much to work off of, but Borsky and I were able to make assumptions on the case. I do not believe in the paranormal, nor am I religious. I believe that everything has a scientific or at least a logical explanation. My guess, based on my experience, was that this was either a cult or a human trafficking ring hiding in the park and covering up the abductions as people going missing in the park. Borsky nodded at my assumption, but I could tell that there was something in his mind suggesting that there was more to this case than what science could explain. You know, every year we do find an animal that we had no idea existed, Borsky said. They're mainly smaller species, but every now and then we do find a large one. I glanced over to Borsky, taking my attention off the road for a brief moment to give him a skeptical look. Do you think that there's an unknown animal attacking these campers that we don't know about? I said with extreme skepticism. My question brought Borsky back to reality, but not all the way. Well, you never know, he said. He continued reading the case file, although silently, and would every now and then share something interesting. Ooh, look at this. There's been reports of ghost sightings as well, he said with excitement. My eyes practically rolled out of my head. Ghost sightings? Really? Every place is haunted depending on who you ask, I said with a smile. Borsky continued reading silently the entire way to the park, and we met up with some of the park rangers. We pulled into the ranger station, and we were greeted by 2 rangers. It was late in the afternoon, so we had a good couple of hours before we called it a day. We asked to be filled in on what they knew about the situation. Unfortunately, they knew very little since the park rangers were instructed not to talk about anything that happened in the park. I glanced at the rangers and noticed that their uniforms were typical, but that they were carrying rifles. Whoa, boys, quite the firepower you got there, I said. Well, this is bear country, and I am sure you're aware of our missing persons numbers as of late, they responded. They walked us inside of the ranger station, and we met with all the other rangers. They were also equally useless to us in terms of information, since no one really had an idea what was going on. We were then informed that there had been an attack that morning, and that we were able to join them in their investigation, if we wished. We joined them and rode down to the campsite in one of the rangers' jeeps. We arrived at the site, but everything else had been roped off. The site had 2 small camping trailers parked next to each other. One of the trailers had been knocked over, and both had large claw marks on the doors and sides. What happened here? Said Borsky. Well, it looks like we had another bear attack last night. These people probably left some food out, and the bears did the rest, said the ranger. I was amazed at this damage. Bears will attack people, but they will avoid it if it is possible. The bears probably figured that there was food inside, but I've never seen a bear so persistent enough to knock over a camping trailer to do so. Are there any survivors? I asked. I was met with a solemn headshake. How many do we figure were camping here? I asked. Looks like 10 campers, responded the ranger. 10 campers? There's no way a bear or even a couple of bears would eat 10 campers in one attack. Our options are that there's either something menacing in these woods, or that this was a cover-up. I was beginning to be envious of the Rangers and their additional firepower. I wasn't getting spooked, but something about this and what I was looking at was making me uneasy. We walked up to the campsite to see that most of the bodies were either taken by the alleged bears, or that the paramedics had already gotten them. There wasn't much for us to see other than the blood and claw marks. The blood was everywhere. I had been on many cases where there were fatalities and even where I killed some people, but none of that compares to what I was looking at. There were parts of the trailer that had been so bloodied that it began to pool in small puddles. We checked the locks on the door, which indeed were locked, but it appeared that the door frame of the trailer gave in, allowing whatever intruder to enter. National parks do not allow guns of any kind, so these campers were literally fish in a barrel with nowhere to go. I was beginning to doubt my trafficker's theory due to the carnage that laid before me. Typically, traffickers want to traffic people that aren't harmed, or at least not dead. Whatever had happened here didn't seem to care whether or not people had died. We left the crime scene after conducting a small investigation, which only resulted in us documenting the claw marks on the trailer. The trailer was made of a somewhat thin sheet metal, but even then, I'm unaware of any kind of bear that can do that. Perhaps I don't know enough about bears. We rode back to the station with some of the rangers, and I was glancing around the park, admiring the beauty. I was trying to take my mind off of what I'd just seen, and this was doing the trick. The park nestled up to this beautiful mountain that had snow on top of it. It was November and it was chilly out, but snow had yet to fall. As I was admiring the landscape, something caught my eye. It was the color yellow that popped out from the lush green forest. I focused on the color to see what appeared to be a small child wearing something yellow off in the distance. It caught my attention, but I thought nothing of it. We made it back to the ranger station, and the sun had a good ways to go before setting. However, the rangers were already closing up the station. Wait, why are you guys closing up? Aren't you guys supposed to be open at all hours? I was then informed, due to recent events of the campers being attacked at night, that they have set a curfew for both rangers and campers that no one was allowed outside after dark. We were given the option to stay at the station, stay in town, or there was a fire tower a few miles in the forest that wasn't occupied by anyone during this time of year. Borsky and I looked at each other, and we both nodded. "We'll take the fire tower," I said. Borsky and I, both being of a detective mindset, knew that since no one would be at the fire tower, that we could investigate at night without interruption. That would be the only way to really get answers. The rangers escorted us out to the fire tower, and to my surprise, the fire tower was quite large. It reached over the tops of the trees. They dropped us off and we hiked up the stairs. The stairs had an interesting feature that you could retract the first 15 steps, much like the ladder on one's attic. The inside of the fire station was quite impressive, having not been used in a few months. There were 3 beds, a small stove, and a table with a few chairs around it. We didn't have much stuff other than our packs and our case notes. Granted, being an FBI field agent, we were already carrying our equipment that we needed to investigate. Once we put our stuff down, we climbed back down the stairs and started walking in a random direction that hopefully would lead us to a campsite. Our walk would prove pointless, as most of the campsites were empty. We didn't know if this was because of the off-season, or if that campers knew what was happening. We walked a good mile or so, and we eventually found an old-looking trailer parked at one of the campsites. As we walked over to the trailer, I saw a yellow flash again. I looked over and saw the small girl standing about 50 yards away. She was just standing there, looking at us. I waved to the little girl, and me and Borsky walked over to the trailer. The trailer was old, and the tires that supported it were flat. Not a good sign. We knocked on the trailer, and we didn't get a response. Granted, it was getting dark, and there was a really good possibility that this trailer was abandoned. We left the trailer and went back to where we saw the girl, but she was gone. Our options were either to continue down this now darkening trail to find the girl, or head back to the fire tower. I glanced at my watch to see that it was about 7:30 p.m., but the trees were already blocking much of what was left of daylight. We decided to head back and come back tomorrow with some of the rangers. We hiked back, and by this time, it was pitch dark out. The sun had completely set, and the trees seemed to add a layer of thick darkness that would swallow the light of our flashlights. It was probably a good idea that we turned around when we did. We went up the stairs to the fire station, and we retracted the first 15 steps, much like the attic stairs I had mentioned earlier. We obviously did this to prevent any unwelcome guests from coming up the stairs while we slept. To be completely honest, having seen the campsite earlier, it actually bothered me to where I'd actually feared for the first time in the field in a long time. We reached the top of the fire station, and due to our brief yet tiresome hike, we fell asleep rather quickly. I dreamt that night of something rather horrific. I dreamt that I was in the woods alone, walking down the path that we saw the small child on. I could feel eyes all around me, and a strong presence of evil. I continued down the path until I came across something hunched over in the middle of the trail. I didn't have a flashlight, but I could still see in the dark to a degree. The thing hunched down seemed to be eating something. I could hear the crunching and tearing of bone and tissue. My legs didn't move, but I could feel myself getting closer. The creature from behind looked very similar to a human, if it wasn't for the antlers on its head. Its back was pale, its muscles looked dried and withered, as if you left meat in the freezer for too long. I was now close enough to see that the creature was eating Agent Borsky. Borsky was still alive and thrashing around in pain, although the creature easily kept him down with one hand. My fear overcame me, and rather than helping Borsky, I tried to run, but I couldn't. I think this notified the creature, and it stopped eating Borsky to look at me. The creature's face was completely human, although its ears, lips, and nose had withered off its body and were no longer there. It bore yellowish fangs, and its eyes were blood red. Its claws were large and rugged, unlike that of a bear or a tiger. I could now understand the damage of the 2 trailers from earlier. The creature stood up and swiped at my throat, but before it could land its killing blow, I woke up inside of the fire station. When I woke, I was covered in sweat. I was completely terrified. I glanced over to Borsky, and he was asleep. Something outside caught my eye, and I could see outside the window that there was something just outside of our door. I grabbed my gun and my flashlight, shined my light outside to see a familiar flash of yellow. I went to the door and opened it, and saw the girl in yellow now starting to go down the stairs. How was this possible? How did she get up the stairs since we removed the first couple of steps? I was baffled. I tried talking to her, but she just kept moving. I shouted to Borsky and told him that he needed to wake up and follow me. He groaned and began to get up, and I followed the girl down the steps. I couldn't ever get a good look at her. Whenever I would shine my light directly at her, she would completely disappear, only to appear a few more feet ahead of where she once stood. I knew that something about this was unlike any experience I had ever had, and that I had no explanation on what was going on. Borsky finally caught up to me, and I told him that I think that this girl we're following is a ghost. I couldn't see his face, but I knew that his eyes were wide and that he believed me. She then led us down the dark trail. Even though it was dark and we didn't know where we were going, I felt comforted, as if I was being led by someone I could trust, and that I was in good hands. She ended up leading us a good distance away, down an old path that didn't look used anymore. The path was barely noticeable, even having a guide to show us where it was. The trail was completely overgrown. Borsky and I had to push through in order to follow the girl. We walked what I would guess to be 5 miles down this path, but it was probably more like 2. The weeds and brush made it very difficult to get anywhere, and we had no idea how we were going to get back. The girl finally stopped and pointed at what appeared to be a very old cabin. The girl would no longer disappear when I shined my light at her, and I noticed that her dress to be very out of date. She looked as if she was once a pioneer of some kind. Her skin was pale and her eyes were dark. Although I knew I was looking at a ghost, I wasn't afraid. She never said anything, but just pointed at the cabin. Borsky and I knew that asking her questions would be pointless, and that whatever questions we had would be answered by entering the cabin. We shined our lights on the cabin and saw that it was not of this time. We looked back at the girl to see that she had disappeared. We pressed on the cabin door, which gave us much resistance, but eventually squeaked open. Inside, we could see what appeared to be a family cabin. There were still plates on the table and an old makeshift furniture placed around the room. I saw an old musket that must have been the late 1800s. As I was admiring the rifle, I noticed an engraving on the butt of the gun. Jeremiah, it said. Borsky called me over and shined his light to a place on the floor next to the fireplace. The floor was stained with a dark reddish brown, and it was next to a yellow dress, much like the one we saw on the girl. After a quick investigation, inside the fireplace we were able to find small but human bones. What happened here? Borsky said. I paused and used my detective mind while putting together what I knew about some of the pioneers. I have heard of pioneers getting snowed in or not having enough food back in those days, and were forced to make a difficult decision to survive. Borsky, I think someone ate this girl. We checked the plates on the table, and unfortunately it did confirm my theory. The bones on the plates were small human bones. As we came to this conclusion, we heard a sound outside. It sounded as if something large was pushing itself through the overgrown brush with great speed, as if we found something that someone did not want us to see. We quickly ran to the door and locked it with the old locks, yet still working. The cabin did have old and somewhat opaque windows, yet we could still see shapes through it. The door began to shake violently, which shook the entire cabin. A creature then broke a window and tried to enter through it, but it was too large to fit. We could now see that the creature resembled that thing I saw in my dreams. It was tall, and it looked withered and pale. Its head had antlers, and its face lacked features. Borsky and I opened fire on the creature, which appeared to harm the creature, causing it to panic. While trying to enter the window, one of its antlers got stuck inside the window. The creature tried frantically to remove its large head from the window, but it was stuck. Borsky and I fired most of our ammo, but I told him to wait. Seeing now that this creature couldn't move, I walked over to it. I picked up the old rifle and pointed to the name on it, saying, "Jeremiah?" The creature looked at me with knowing eyes. It clearly recognized the name. "What did you do?" I said to the creature. The creature's panic had stopped, and it sat there as if it was in shame. It let out a growl, and a low, gravelly voice said, "We were hungry." I then lifted my pistol and shot the creature in the eye. The back of its head came off, and a thick, dark liquid splattered the inside of the cabin. The creature then spasmed before laying lifeless in the window. Whatever this thing was, it was clearly dead. I took the bones from inside, as well as the yellow dress, and dug a small grave with an old shovel I found inside. I placed the bones on the dress inside and covered the small grave with dirt. Borsky and I left the creature in the window and made our way back to the ranger station. At this time, the sun was beginning to rise. We could hear the birds chirping, and we felt a sense of dread lift from the forest. We finally made it back to the station, and we were greeted by some of the rangers. We told them rather confidently that we had single-handedly solved the missing persons problem. They looked at us confused, and we all hopped into the jeep. We showed them the hidden trail that led to the cabin, but to our horror and dismay, the creature that we had recently killed was no longer in the window. It was missing. It was right there, guys. I'm telling you. It had these big antlers and claws. The rangers nodded their head as if they'd seen this before. In fact, they didn't even seem remotely surprised. "We know, fellows. Apparently legend has it, if you eat another human, you turn into those things." I then recalled what the creature said to me before I killed it. We were hungry. We. More than one. "Borsky, how many plates are on the table?" He went inside and quickly confirmed what I had feared. "There's 5 plates. It wasn't just Jeremiah that ate this girl. It was a whole family. There are more of these things out there."
My friend claimed he was attacked by a demon and seeing crazy lights in the sky. I just assumed he was a psycho. Eventually, he told me it all started when he was in the public library and tried draining energy from another person. That essentially confirmed his insanity. A month or so later, he comes down from the mountains and looks like shit. His girlfriend broke up with him, and he had circular bruises and scratches all over his back. We're sitting on my back porch in 20-degree Fahrenheit weather, and there's a lull in the conversation. All of a sudden, I feel what I describe as a humanoid presence standing between us. You know the feeling you get when someone is standing right against your back? It felt like it was made out of burning coals. Just an overwhelming heat that was making me nauseous. Eventually, I felt it touch me, and my stomach physically churned. I turned around and my friend was looking right at me, and he said, "Hey, that's the thing that's following me." Still, no idea what to think of it. He is doing better now, but still has attacks, and weird shit happened to people who live with him. His old roommates from the mountains both went totally insane, like 7th floor bat shit. Used to live in a large house when I was a child. The house had a built-in intercom system that would be used to talk in between all the rooms. The speakers were built into the light switches and were inside every room by the door. However, they were broken and only functioned for the doorbell. Slept alone in my room, but had reoccurring nightmares about things under my bed. I would frequently wake up in the middle of the night and start reading to sleep. One night after waking from another nightmare, I can hear a low voice murmuring throughout my room. Realize it's coming from the intercom and slowly inch towards it. Can barely hear what they're saying. So, I press my ear against the speaker to hear better. The speaker explodes with a shrill laugh that sounds exactly like the Crypt Keeper. It keeps laughing and laughing while I'm freaking the fuck out. End up bolting down the hallway to my parents' room. When I get there, they're already awake and start asking me about all the laughing. In between sobs, I explain it came from the intercom. They just stared at me for a hot minute before gathering up their pillows and blankets so we could sleep in the living room together. I brought the story up to them years later. My dad isn't too keen on spooky stuff, so he claimed I had a nightmare and didn't actually hear it. When I asked my mom about it, she got really serious and told me, "I thought you had turned the TV on at night and it was just way too loud. But I heard it too." It's not super crazy, but it's one of the few times I've had a spooky experience. And someone else was there to say, "Yeah, I saw/heard that shit too." I've posted this on here before. Shit was seriously weird as fuck, and I remember it like it was yesterday. My parents still claim they don't even remember it happening. Be a young boy in the early 90s. Family cookout in the summertime at my grandparents in upstate New York. Whole extended family is there. All aunts, uncles, and cousins. Think it was Independence Day. Adults are talking, kids are running around playing, everyone is eating. Great cookout. Early evening, maybe 5 or 6 p.m. I see him first. Random haggard-looking dude approaching from the deep woods behind the house, stumbling up toward front yard where everyone is. Think, what the fuck? As it's literally like 100 acres of woods in that direction. No way he could have come from there without walking for miles and miles and miles. Dude's in stained, raggedy clothing. Looks homeless and drunk as fuck. I'm the first to point him out. Dad sees him and immediately says, "Everyone in the house, now." Women rush into the house with all of us kids. Think my dad and uncles are going to fuck him up. But then they rush in with us, and I distinctly remember Dad locking the door. They seemed honestly terrified. This was so weird because both my dad and uncle were cops, both like lieutenants at the time. They were both wearing handguns and could have had the entire police department there in a moment's notice if they wanted to. My other uncle was a former boxer and built like a brick shithouse. My grandpa in those days was an auto mechanic and built bigger than all of them. Dude was seriously like 6'6", a solid 320 pounds in just muscle. Remember watching out the window as this homeless bum with gray hair, maybe in his 60s, just stumbles around the picnic tables. Bum starts picking up burgers and hot dogs and taking a bite of each and setting them down. I was maybe 6 at the time, and I honestly was furious that my dad and uncles weren't doing anything. I remember at one point my mom asking my dad, "Aren't you going to do something?" Dad just kind of looked out the window but didn't act. Remember one of my uncles, the boxer, about to go out, but my grandpa stopping him with just a look. Finally, homeless dude straight up flipped the picnic table and sent all the food flying. Begins laughing maniacally. Finally, he just kind of stumbles off down the road, towards town. Years later, I asked both parents about this as well as a cousin who was there. None of them remember it. Mom tries to tell me it was a dream, but I remember this shit plain as day. Still no idea what happened that day. I had awful recurring nightmares when I was about 3. I'm 19 now, but I can still remember them. One of the most notable was one where I was sitting on my bed. I had a loft that was made of wood, and a ladder that would go up to the mattress. It would begin with me just sitting up, and everything looked real, like I wasn't even asleep. Then, I would hear this scratching sound coming from the adjacent room, and it would slowly get louder, then stop. After a bit of this going on, there would be a dark shape that would crawl into my room and up the ladder until it met my face. It was like a fucked up cross between a scorpion and a human, and it walked on all fours, but the feet were hands. The face was awfully disfigured, and it looked almost like a skull with skin stretched over it, and a really long tongue. I would wake up after that and usually piss to bed because I was so scared. The closest thing I can think of that it looked like were the centaurs from Fallout. Pig related. So, this just happened to me, and I'm honestly freaking out. I don't normally come to X, but this seems like something I just need to share because of how scary it was. Be me, about half an hour ago. I'm about ready to go to bed. I can't fall asleep. If only there was something I can do to help me sleep. Time to fap. I have a bottle of lotion in my nightstand. My phone is a piece of shit and will only charge if it's off. My laptop is across the room charging, and I'm too snug in my bed to get it. Guess it's time to use my old imagination. Close eyes. Think of one of my favorite scenes, now starring me. I thought I would struggle after being spoiled by internet porn, but I get hard and decide to take my time to wear myself out. Suddenly, I get an uneasy feeling. It feels like someone is watching me, but I live alone on the 4th floor of a complex, with the curtains closed. Keep vapping. I try to get back in the mood, but I can't shake the feeling that someone is watching me. I can't hear anything. This time, I open my eyes, look around my room, and I don't notice anything. Then, I look at my door. I left it open, but I think I can see something. It looks like a shadow tall enough to just barely be touching the top of the door frame. My heart sinks. I think my mind is playing tricks on me, but I'm still scared. I don't notice, but my hand is still jacking me off like it's on autopilot. Then, something freaky happens. The shadow inches closer towards my bed. I thought I was just seeing things, but the shadow is definitely moving. I got a better look at it. It was a pitch black figure, really tall, and it looked like it was wearing a thick trench coat. The thing I really noticed was there was something off with its head. It was like it was wearing a hat with a wide brim, but it was all the same color of black as the rest of its body. Pig related. Then I noticed it doesn't have a fucking face. I can't see a nose, eyes, or a mouth. It was like something was obstructing it. I'm still masturbating even though I'm terrified right now. I didn't notice. I was too focused on the shadow figure. I'm jacking it, but I feel mobilized to get up. Then it reaches the foot of my bed. It leans in like it's looking over my feet. Then I come. I was so scared, but I kept masturbating. The figure then looks back at me. I don't know how it was looking at me, but I just knew by how it was facing me. It then backed out of my room, still facing me. Then, it escapes my view. I lay in my bed for like 5 minutes processing what just happened. I get up and grab my baseball bat out of my closet and scope out my place. My door is still locked. Every other room is empty. I even checked the windows. They're all locked. I slumped down in my recliner thinking about it. Consider it was sleep paralysis, but I know I was awake. I have never had sleep paralysis in my life, though. I remember the feel of it looking at me. I could also remember the feel of my cock in my hand. Now I'm here writing this. I went to write it off as a nightmare, but I just know I was awake. I just also wanted to write it down in case I forgot, just so I can have something to fall back onto, to prove I'm not crazy. So, X, am I being haunted now? And did I make a bad first impression?